All right, welcome to the 2015 NBA playoffs podcast, coming to you from Rollins College in our upgraded studio, and we're here to give you our insight on this year's edition of the playoffs. Once again, I'm joined by my co-host, Jackson Pellingra.
Hello, happy to be here.
Okay. We both sort of upgraded our on-air talents since we last spoke to you.
Sure, we can say that.
Check out my YouTube page if you like more in-depth information on that.
And some early shilling.
We'll get right into it. We're going to try to make each conference about half an hour long, so that it's more manageable to listen to and whatever. We're going to start off with MVP discussion because obviously the MVPs haven't been named. So why don't you start?
Well,
I think we both agree on Stephen Curry.
Well, let's say the candidates first. I think the three serious competitors for the award are obviously Stephen Curry, James Harden, and Anthony Davis. And you could make a reasonable argument for any of the three, really, which is pretty unique in MVP races.
Throw in LeBron, just as a...
Well, I think it's a great year, relatively speaking, to other NBA players, but it's a pretty pedestrian, or well, not pedestrian, but pretty average year in terms of what you expect out of LeBron. And the three guys that we mentioned just have had career years in every way. And really when you put, especially Curry and Harden statistics next to each other, they're very, very close, with Curry having a slight advantage. But an argument that could be made for Harden is that Curry's better teammates boost some of his statistics a little bit. And yeah, like I said, that's perfectly reasonable, and I think we both agree. But I think we both concur that Curry should and will win the award.
I mean, whenever you play on a team that gets 67 wins, that's always a leg up in my book. And especially I read somewhere where he made 77 out of 80 3-pointers in practice.
Well, that's,
I think that just...
That's kind of... Yeah, I didn't really factor that into my consideration, but sure, that's impressive.
Shows how great of a shooter he is. I mean, I think we all know that.
He's demonstrated that.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think if Harden was to win, certainly the quality of his teammates would definitely play into it.
Right. I mean,
obviously Harden's quote-unquote supporting cast last year. You had Chandler Parsons, who's now in Dallas, and that's an interesting thing we'll talk about later. Facing his former team, but he's hurt.
Well, and this
reel me in on that.
This is not to say that he has bad teammates,
Yeah.
but you have to factor in that Howard missed a good portion of the year.
True.
And while Ariza has filled a similar role to Parsons, he's probably, I think most people would agree, a slight downgrade at this stage in his career.
And Harden was toe-to-toe with Westbrook for leading scorer.
Right, and doing that as efficiently as he has, just because he's so good at getting fouled, which people scoff at these days, but it's a specific skill that he's, I think, hands down the best at in the league at doing.
Right. It also shows that he can hit his free throws too.
Right.
There's no point to always going to the foul line if you can't shoot free throws. So
right,
he's getting free points that way.
Right.
While Curry, I mean, you could go off that argument and say Curry's points are harder earned.
Well, it's points are
Harden.
points.
True.
I mean, you take advantage and use your skills to exploit the rules, and you can't punish a guy for doing it a different way.
Right.
And on the defensive end, Harden has definitely shown quite a bit of improvement this year.
Right.
I mean, yes, there's still the occasional highlight of him seeming to just be looking off into space while playing quote-unquote defense, but I think he's cut down on those instances quite a bit. So I would have no problem with the league giving the award to him, but I think it's going to Curry, and I think that's well-deserved.
Mm-hmm. Now, would you say that this is Harden's best chance to win an MVP award? Considering the fact that Durant was hurt for the majority of the year, Westbrook.
I mean, Westbrook had a great season, just
really,
not quite in the league of these
really
guys.
Isn't in the discussion. Howard was hurt. Obviously, Kobe was hurt.
Right. Well, it's difficult to imagine him having a more effective season.
Duncan as well. Dirk.
Just keep throwing names out there. Kevin Garnett.
Zach Randolph.
Easy there. Yeah, no, I think that this is probably his best chance to win, and it certainly doesn't dampen his season at all if he doesn't win, because just another guy also had an out of his mind career season. So yeah, I think that might be safe to say, but who knows? He could continue to improve, which would be pretty remarkable if he manages to top this season.
Be great to see, because I saw him play back in 2009 in the NCAA tournament, first 2 rounds, and yeah, I knew he was going to be a first round pick, but if you would have told me like he would be in the MVP consideration, I didn't see it back then. He's a lot like,
even when he was in the
he's
NBA,
a lot like Westbrook used to be.
Even when he was in the NBA Finals, he was coming off the bench.
Right.
I mean, albeit he was playing a lot of minutes, but
yeah,
really, Oklahoma City really missed on his true potential.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand they had to make a difficult choice signing him or Ibaka to a max contract, but it's pretty clear that they made a mistake with that one.
Right.
Because they almost got no value.
But you look at it the other way. If you keep Harden, would Westbrook be the player that he is now? Maybe not.
It's hypothetical and it's difficult to say.
Would Durant be as dominant offensively
Well,
as he is now? Probably.
I think we've seen the issue with Oklahoma City, even with Durant, is their offense is pretty much just, hey, pass the ball to Durant or Westbrook and let them do things. Where with Harden's a better distributor than either of those guys, and I think that really could have made their offense a lot, given more dimensions to their offense than what we've seen, even when Durant is healthy. So I think that.
So that's our opinions on the MVP race. I guess we should just throw this out there. This is our Western Conference portion of the podcast. I guess we're gonna go.
Sure. Well, I mean,
because we just mentioned pretty much just Western Conference players, so we might as well.
I mean, it's the MVP race. It's not really specific.
Well, I mean, the only players really in contention are Western Conference players.
Right. But anyway.
So now we're gonna.
Well, in terms of Coach of the Year, if we're in the West, I think it's pretty obvious that it's Steve Kerr. That there's pretty much no debate.
Little Stevie is Reggie Miller.
Well, Reggie Miller. I wouldn't.
We could dedicate a whole podcast to how we feel about Reggie.
Yeah, he's quite a broadcaster. But yeah, I think that there's just no debate that Steve Kerr has pretty much maximized the talent that's been given to him. And
now you're starting to see going off on a little tangent here, but you're starting to see a lot more, whether it's colleges or professional teams going after coaches that haven't had any prior coaching experience, but they might have played, been like really smart basketball IQ players when they played, and they still remained in the game, doing broadcasting.
Right. Well, and Steve Kerr was a general manager,
Yeah.
so it's not like it's not like managing things in the league is foreign to him.
Right.
And he's just, I mean, everyone who comes into contact with him seems to regard him as one of the brightest minds in the league.
Yep, and there's already 2 coaches in the league that were signed after their last season, Jason Kidd and Derek Fisher. So, I mean, I think that's something you're gonna start to see more of in the future.
Right. So, but we both agree that
Yeah,
Steve Kerr is
I don't even think it's a
indisputable
question.
coach of the year.
Now we're gonna get into teams that maybe were projected to not just make the playoffs but really make some noise and didn't for one reason or another.
But I think there's one Western Conference team.
Right.
There's obvious reasons why they are where they are.
Oklahoma City.
And I think they had a pretty respectable season, all things considered.
Yep.
Although I still think Brooks will be fired because he's proven himself to be pretty incompetent, especially in the playoffs in the past. When, like we said before, they revert to give the ball to Kevin or Russell and then let them do things.
Which could potentially open the door for Florida Gators coach Billy Donovan.
Him or others. I mean, no, let's not make this too much of a homer.
Something I don't want to see happen, but I think it's inevitable that Donovan will go to the NBA at some point.
I don't think it's inevitable. There's a high probability, but I wouldn't say that it's inevitable.
I definitely don't see him going to any other college team. It's either
that's
either UF or an NBA team.
Yeah, sure, but yeah, it's a possibility. So, yeah, Oklahoma City, they fought valiantly with what they had,
Right.
and certainly Westbrook can't be criticized for this season. He carried them in all facets of the game, so he should be applauded for that. But
be interesting to see if they hold on to Dion Waiters.
Yeah.
I almost feel like they won't because Waiters is someone, he's a player that, and he was trying to be this in Cleveland, sort of like a gunner, sort of, wants the ball in his hands, wants to be the main focus.
He's like a really poor man's J.R. Smith at times.
Yeah.
Because at least J.R. Smith has shown that he can go on hot shooting streaks where Waiters just is kind of trash most of the time.
Right.
So Oklahoma City's a real big thing. I think we both expected Phoenix to regress a little bit this season, and especially when they obviously got rid of Dragic. They were clearly conceding.
39 and 43.
Right, certainly a respectable season.
Nothing to hold your head down about.
Right, and as well as I think a big surprise was Utah having as strong of a season as they did. And
Utah's, I didn't really pay much attention to them, but
getting rid of Cantor,
Dante Exum, I think will need a couple seasons in the NBA because
but their youth is amazing. I mean, have you heard the statistic about Utah that they are on average younger than the BYU basketball team?
Makes sense.
And so they have definitely 3-4 years down the road they'll be a serious threat.
Yeah,
if not sooner.
And it's always the NBA is always better whether it's Utah or Denver, it's one of those sort of like mountain teams. It's on top of their game.
I don't know how to dispute that, so I'll just nod my head.
Back to the glory days of Stockton and Malone.
Anyway, let's move on to the first series in the West.
Let's move on to the actual playoff.
Yeah, we've spent quite a while dilly-dallying here. But the first...
Too much. We're making good time.
Right, so... The first series is Golden State versus New Orleans, who clinched their spot last night with a dramatic victory over San Antonio. And yeah, I think this series is pretty clear that Golden State's just going to thrash them.
Yeah, partly because, not just because New Orleans is, they're clearly the inferior team, but, they've got to be mentally exhausted, just having gone through, sneaking into the playoffs.
Right. And Davis's health is always a question, and their success is pretty much totally contingent on him.
Right.
Honestly, we really didn't spend enough time lauding his season, because he had a season that was maybe not quite on par, but just right smidgen below the two guys who we discussed
at the beginning
at
of the season, he was probably the front runner for MVP, I think. Maybe in the first couple of months.
I've said in the past that he's been growing at just such a ridiculous rate for it to be his third year in the league, and for him to be where he is, I wouldn't have been surprised. But I don't think most people were seriously saying that he was going to have this incredible of a season.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's just been a progression.
And hey, maybe without his injuries, New Orleans is a seed or two higher, and he's a more serious MVP candidate. So, but regardless, they've had a nice season, but they're not a match for Golden State.
I think this is the one series in this conference that'll probably be a sweep.
And maybe. 4 games, 5 games, doesn't really matter either way. But yeah, it's going to be quick.
Because I think Golden State's got a sort of a point to prove. Because I don't have the records in front of me, but when's the last time they made it to whatever conference finals? Or
they did win a series last year, but
yeah.
But hey, regardless of whatever bulletin board material they have, if you buy into any of that stuff, I think that they're just clearly superior and will advance easily.
Okay. Second matchup, 2 Texas teams, Houston and Dallas.
Right, who we had divergent opinions on in our preview of the season, and I think, not to brag, but I think my opinion is slightly won out that Houston is better, although Dallas is not obviously no slouch and can give them trouble. But I think the key factor that really prevents Dallas from being a serious contender is that just Rondo has not panned out, that he's not been able to regain any semblance of his old form. He just can't make free throws, and he still hasn't developed a jump shot this deep into his career.
I've complained about this many times with the Gator point guard I won't mention, but can't shoot, can't hit free throws, and if you're the point guard, that spells a lot of problems for your team.
Right, and Houston.
Casey Hill was his name.
Well, yeah, that's a lot. I'm sure a lot of people were waiting for the hot Casey Hill references. But now that Houston has regained some semblance of health and they're in prime form, I think that they shouldn't have a huge amount of trouble. But I could totally see this series going 6 games because you have the Dirk factor, which you can never rule out.
Yeah. And what really hamstrings Dallas is Chandler Parsons probably won't be available.
Already said struggles this season.
You'll like this. I have an inside source that was with him over the weekend and mentioned to me that his knee is in bad shape, and emotionally he's not where he needs to be.
Hmm.
And he was my source. I'll keep him anonymous.
Don't name him, yeah, please. It's not.
But he was saying that this was obviously over the weekend, but if game one of the playoffs was whatever, Saturday or Sunday, he wouldn't be able to play. So obviously, unless something miraculous happens, I don't see Parsons taking part in this series.
Right. So with that knowledge, I mean, yeah, it did say that it wouldn't be shocking if it went 6, but I think 5 is the most reasonable prediction.
And you know, Dallas is always famous for sort of dragging out series and making things interesting.
Right, because I mean, obviously, Rick Carlisle is, I think, easily a top 5 coach in the league.
Jim Carrey lookalike.
That's totally irrelevant. But yeah, I think we both agree that Houston will still handle them.
Yep.
So the next series is probably the most difficult to predict in all of the playoffs, and you can make a very strong argument for either team, which is the Los Angeles Clippers versus the San Antonio Spurs. What's your just preliminary thoughts about this one?
I don't know if you know my thoughts on the Clippers, but I just feel like there's something missing with them.
What? I'm going to challenge that.
And there's been something missing for probably the last 3 or 4 seasons, ever since they've started to really dominate.
Okay.
Los Angeles.
I've heard, just not to interrupt you, which I am doing, but I've heard this notion of they're missing something. They don't have the key thing.
Yeah,
but
really.
I've never heard anyone be able to actually tell me anything objective what they mean by that.
Yeah, I mean,
because I think this team is great and totally capable of beating the Spurs now that they're healthy.
Maybe it's their bench. Let me reference ESPN.com. Thanks, ESPN.
Let's deal with the slow internet speeds.
Bear with me for a second.
Yeah, it's just that's a point that I've heard oft repeated, and I don't understand it. I think it's just name recognition. Like, oh, the Clippers, they can't be taken seriously, but I don't think that argument holds much water.
I think it's always been their bench.
I think their bench is strong.
I think their bench last year really let them down, and obviously I'm happy for like JJ Redick. He's always been one of my favorites. I don't think anybody would have predicted he averaged 16 points.
No, he's probably the best season of his career.
Definitely.
And Paul has continued to just be obscenely good.
Yep.
I mean, obviously falling under the radar a little bit this year. And now that Griffin is back, I think people just dismiss the Clippers still.
Look at DeAndre Jordan, 15 rebounds a game.
He's gotten better every season.
Has that ever been as high? Is that? I don't think I've ever seen a player average that many rebounds in a game.
Unless you go back to Wilt.
Yeah.
But no, I think that the Clippers are unfairly dismissed just because of their name and their history.
Yeah.
But
although anytime you have Doc Rivers at the helm, that's worth a couple wins in a playoff series, in my opinion.
I disagree with you there. I think that's giving any coach way too much importance to say that they're worth 2 wins in a playoff series. And look who he's coaching. He's coaching against a better coach.
Right.
So,
but
they're at a disadvantage.
But he's facing
he's
a slightly weakened San Antonio team.
Look how San Antonio's been playing.
I mean, obviously they have. I don't think they got rid of anybody of significance.
No, and
last year.
And they're at relative full strength now.
But it seems like, just from like an outsider's point of view, that they, Parker was out for a little bit. Ginobili, it always seems like, is banged up. Duncan gets a night off here and then.
Yeah, I mean, well,
You know,
but you could make the health argument for the Clippers as well with Griffin.
Kawhi Leonard. I feel like Kawhi Leonard sort of had an off season. Do you think that's fair to say?
I mean, he's been injured a lot, but I don't think he's.
I think
When he's been in, I think he's been really good.
I think that's been the story with the Spurs is, if they can stay healthy, I mean, they can
Well, yeah,
win this series.
That's been the recurring story for like 5 years now. Everyone expects them to just collapse and disintegrate.
The just from like people who don't watch them, they're always like, oh, they're never on TV, and then they show up in the playoffs and they're 1 or 2 seed. I mean, this year they're a 6 seed for a reason. Maybe that's because the West is a little bit better, but they've suffered injuries and they're just not.
Okay, but hold on. They were a win away from being a 2 seed. So let's not say, oh, they're a 6, so they've had this huge regression. I mean, that's why this series is so difficult, because these two teams are pretty close to equal, in my opinion. And
I don't really put any stock in the Clippers having home court advantage, really.
Yeah, I'd say that's minor.
There's certain teams that does favor. Portland, I'd say, that definitely favors Golden State.
Yeah, I honestly think the biggest factor in this series will be Parker's health and effectiveness for San Antonio. To have someone to be able to match Paul at distributing efficiently. And
Paul and Austin Rivers, don't forget him.
Well,
Gotta throw out Austin Rivers here at Rollins.
Okay, yeah.
He's over here about 4 or 5 times a year. Pride of Winter Park.
So anyway, how do you feel this series will go? Because I think it's pretty much a toss-up.
I'm saying Clippers in... I'll say San Antonio in 6.
Yeah, I mean, it's just...
It's very easy to call this series a 7-game series. I don't think I'm willing to go that far.
I mean, it's not a huge leap or anything.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of any particular like matchup thing that would really tip.
Well, clearly, I mean, just based off this season, if we're going position by position, Paul, has had a much better season than Parker. So obviously the Clippers are one up there. At shooting guard, you got J.J. Redick versus Ginobili. You got to go J.J. Redick on that one. For this season.
Sure.
Playoffs is a different story, obviously. Small forward. Who is the Clippers small forward? Is it Matt Barnes?
Well, and Logan Crawford plays.
Yeah, Crawford plays starters minutes, but
yeah, Barnes is in there.
Yeah, it's pretty much Matt Barnes.
Turkoglu's been getting some minutes.
It's pretty much a combined effort versus Leonard. I give the Spurs that. So it's 2-1 Clippers. Power forward, you got Griffin.
But we also have to consider that the Spurs are more than the sum of their parts usually.
And if we're talking about bench, I mean definitely Spurs.
Right. So it's just I can't think of any.
If it comes down to coaching, you got to give it to the Spurs. I'd say.
Oh, of course. I mean,
it's no slight against Doc Rivers.
They have the best coach in the history of the league, so
it's no slight against Doc Rivers. It's just that he's going up against
a living legend.
A living legend. That's a good way to put it. So yeah, I see the Spurs winning in 6.
Yeah, I mean, I've been championing the Clippers for the past couple of years because I think people just don't take them seriously, even though they should. And obviously they had a heartbreaking exit against Oklahoma City last season. That series totally could have gone either way.
For sure.
And I feel the same about this, and I really want to pick the Clippers, but I'm just so hesitant to pick against San Antonio ever.
Answer this: if they were playing any other team besides Golden State or San Antonio, they'd be a lock.
Not a lock. I mean, I might pick them over Houston.
Yeah.
But this is very difficult. Yeah, I think I'll pick the Clippers because, I mean, as much as the Spurs get the deserved praise for being over 50 wins every season and making deep runs, they've been known to also lose in the first round from year to year, so it's not unheard of. And it's no huge slight on them. I mean, that's just what happens when you play in the better conference.
Right.
So yeah, I'm going to pick the Clippers in 7.
Okay.
I'm hedging.
I think we're both admit that we can see that series going either way.
Oh right, yeah. That's why there's no distinguishing factor that's saying like, oh, I have to put them ahead.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll go with.
So I think
Los Angeles.
I think we both agree that that's the series to look out for, and watch.
Right, that'll be great. And this next one should be should be great as well.
I'm always interested in watching Portland. For sure.
Right, yeah. Although,
especially when they're at home.
Right, that was always.
They'll have home court advantage this series.
No, they won't. Even though they're the higher seed, Memphis has the better record.
Oh, true.
Because they just won their division. I think Memphis is clearly better. I mean, Portland's had a nice season, but I don't think that they improved, at least at the rate that I expected them to, based on last year.
Improved their bench.
Right. Well,
Which was the knock on
that's the
them last
fundamental
year.
flaw. Like Lillard has continued to improve, and he's so much fun to watch. But
was that Lillard's shot last year?
yeah, to beat Houston. But Memphis is just ridiculous defensively. Conley has. I mean, we talked about this I think a little last year, but Conley has really come into his own as like I'd say top 6 point guard in the league, maybe even a little higher.
Yeah. It's been a natural progression for him.
Yeah, he really was not very heralded out of college, and he's really just worked on his game and developed into a star player. And then Gasol just continues to be dominant.
Mark.
It's a big Mark. Hey, Pau was no slouch this season either.
You got Zebo as well.
Right. Just so yeah, I think that
Nick Kalathis as well.
Of course,
Another
the real Greek freak.
Another Winter Park Castleberry reference.
Got to make that connection. But I think both of us can.
Hopefully he's got his hair product consumption under control, so
right,
he's not suspended again.
That's always crucial. He's very greasy. I think both of us agree though that Memphis is clearly stronger and will win this series.
Right, I think. I'd like to know who Portland's GM is, but is something Allen? Or is that the owner?
Well, Paul Allen. Yeah, I think Paul Allen is the owner. And
I've always liked Terry Stotts though. I feel like he's a lot like Dwayne Casey in that he's more suited to like maybe I don't want to call them a small market, but sort of like one of those teams that is consistently 4th or 5th in a conference, and pretty much every season is a good season.
Right. I mean, we can't say for certain that he wouldn't succeed on a bigger stage, but yeah, some guys are suited to less media attention.
Yeah.
But anyway, to wrap up this conference, I think Well, I'm going to pick Memphis in 6.
I'd like to see Portland win, but I'm going with you. I say Memphis in 6 as well.
Right, I just think their dominance, rebound, and they're a team with reasonable depth, and when you juxtapose that with Portland, I mean, there is always the chance that Lillard goes off. Oh, actually, well, the biggest factor that we haven't talked about is Wes Matthews is out for the season for Portland, and that's really just completely dampened their chances at making a run, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I mean, that you have some people say that could rallying around him could ignite the team into a deep run, but I just think that they're missing way too much athleticism and scoring with him gone.
Yeah.
So I think that it's safe to say.
I mean, anytime you have players like Lillard and LaMarcus Aldridge, I mean, I'd definitely say you're good enough to win a series in a 4-5 matchup. But, once again, it just comes back to the lack of not lack of talent, but
Lack of depth.
Yeah, lack of depth. I mean, they play. It's not like they play 7-8 guys. They play pretty much a full rotation.
Just the talent gulf is immense.
The talent level on Portland's bench is subpar.
Right, and with Matthews gone, I think that I won't say
Western Conference playoff teams.
Right, I won't say that they stand no chance in this series, but I would probably give Memphis a 75% chance or higher.
Right.
And certainly, if Portland had advanced, I think that they would be no match for whoever they would face in the next round.
Yeah. Who's Memphis's coach, by the way?
Jeez, you're putting me on the spot. Well, they got rid of
Lionel Hollins, but that was a couple seasons ago. They got rid of.
I always forget coach names. Jeez, you really brought this show to a grinding halt.
Our listeners are.
This is why you don't ask questions that we haven't researched before. This is the rule of broadcasting. No dead air. I don't know how to. It's not. It looks like Jorger, but it's pronounced or Jaeger. I think it's
Jaeger.
pronounced. Yeah,
that's right. Okay.
Big Dave. Yep. He's obviously done a yeoman's job with
admirable job.
So anyway,
so to recap, we both have Golden State. Did we say a sweep in that? I think
it's inconsequential,
I think we said we both said Houston and.
I said
6?
Houston in 5.
And I said Houston in 6. We were both differing on the next one. I said San Antonio in 6. You said LA in 6, right?
7. But totally, at least for me, I'm totally hedging my bets and saying that it's pretty much a coin toss between those two teams. It's just so close.
And it's sort of a shame that one of those teams is not going to make it past the first round.
Yeah, definitely. But that's the state of the Western Conference.
Yep. Well, like the Final Four, maybe Arizona and Wisconsin should have met in the Final Four versus Elite Eight, but.
Right.
And then the last matchup, I think we both said Memphis in 6, right?
Right. Well, I mean, 5 or 6, and I'll just say 6 because. So. Second round of the West.
Oh, we're doing the whole thing?
Well, we'll get to
yeah.
the representative of the Western Conference. I think that's reasonable. So.
Catch me off guard.
Well, hey, you gotta be prepared, man. Oh well, actually, we could do all that at the end. If you want to just move on. Okay.
Well, we're making 2 separate.
Okay, we'll cut that part out. We'll cut this part out.
No, well let's just keep going then.
Well, no, but we want to make sure that we have the matchups correct.
Okay.
We had some discrepancies, so.
All right, so we'll have a different.
We'll cut that part out.
We'll have a different podcast for.
Well, we'll do it at the end.